Thank you, everyone. My name is Ben Block. I am a committee person for in the Second Ward, Division 3. Thank you. Division 3 represented here. Okay, so yes, this is the beginning of our at-large city council forum. It's going to be, should we just do it without this?
No, you need it.
Okay, you need it. All right. Further away. Perfect? This is perfect. All right, so it's going to be a packed day because there's a lot of you all running for a very important office representing, of course, the whole city. So we wanted to do this right, give everyone a fair chance to hear from everybody and do it in as equal and as coordinated way as possible. In addition to the Second Ward, who you are obviously presenting yourselves to today, we are recording on Facebook Live, so say hello to the camera right in front of you. And we will be posting this on our website, philsecondward.org. Got that right? So because we are going to be dutiful with time, we don't have time, unfortunately, for you all to give a full bio presentation or stump speech. We did get answers, very thorough answers to the questionnaire. Thank you all for completing that. That was the first test to get you here. You can do that. You all did it fantastically. Thank you. So we are all hopefully going to do our homework we haven't already to review. Very good. We have our last candidate, right? Billy Greenman, please come on up. Yes. We will be reviewing all those answers, so no need to cover the basics. We're going to hopefully dive a little deeper with our questions today. So I'm just going to introduce everyone by name, and please correct me if I mess anyone's name up. We have my far right, your far left, starting with Adrian Rivera Reyes. You got it. Thank you. Abona Paul Higgins. Thank you. Aaron Santamore.
Hi, everybody.
Derek Green. Erica Almiron. Deja Lynn Alvarez. Helen Gim. And Isaiah Thomas. Okay. Very good. So we are not going to be taking questions from the audience. We formed our questions hopefully to cover all the issues that were identified as priority issues by our committee people. We will be asking a series of questions, all of which will be limited in time to 1 minute, which I understand is hard, but please do your best. Carrie in the front here will be giving a signal of when you have reached that minute mark, so please start winding it down once you see that signal. In addition to the 1 minute questions, we'll be firing off some quick, essentially a yes or no question. So we've given you these 3 cards in front of you, if I may borrow yours. So green is yes for those who can't read all the way in the back. Green is yes. Red is no. And because we understand policy is complicated, it's complicated. So, yeah. Let's see, what else? So the last question will be a little bit longer, 3 minutes. We'll get to that later, obviously. But if for any of those questions you feel like we weren't able to, the time didn't allow you to cover everything you want to talk about, or you said something that you later regret, please do email us. We will distribute those follow-up answers. And I think that's it. Okay. We're all clear? All good? All right, let's get into it. So we're going to start all the way at the end, Adrian, and just work your way to your left. Again, remember it's a 1 minute. So you ready to carry with timing? All right. So diving right in. First question, please provide two proposals for how to increase public school funding and close our educational resource disparities.
Great. So the number one would be the elimination of the 10-year tax abatement. We know that by eliminating the 10-year tax abatement, it will provide revenue of $67 million a year that could go into our schools. Right? Our schools are massively underfunded, and that is extremely important and we need to provide our children with the opportunities and the educational resources so that they can actually thrive and succeed and get to a point where they are able to decide what they can do with their life and want to do with their life. And the second one would be creating a tax on luxury properties and vacant properties so that we can actually tax the rich and the wealthy in our city and then put that money into our schools as well. Thank you.
Same
question.
Can you repeat it, please?
Sure. So we're looking for two specific proposals for how you would propose increasing public school funding and closing the educational resource disparities in our city.
Number one, about 8 years ago, City Council passed a resolution to sue the state for fair and adequate funding, which is indicated in the state constitution. I think that would be one place to start, since that is mandated by the Constitution. I think another thing is that we have a lot of recyclables in the city. One in particular, the plastic bottles that we don't receive the 5-cent deposit. I think something like that should be explored in terms of adding some additional funding to the school district.
Thank you. I'm also for adjusting the 10-year tax abatement. I want to see us go to a graduated tax abatement system so that we can take a look at how it's affecting the development community in especially the Center City area. There are other opportunities I'd like to take a look at, school income tax, and I'd like to look at our parking system and explore how we can get more from especially residential parking permits. And how we can use that money to push towards school funding issues.
Good afternoon. I definitely, believe we should reform the 10-year tax abatement as one way for funding. Second point, we need to bring pilots back to the city of Philadelphia. There's a 5-part test in reference to whether an entity is a purely public charity. We have a very good city solicitor where we can use affirmative litigation to really test that test. We have a lot of large nonprofits that operate to me almost like the NFL, which should be providing more resources for our schools. And then the third point, I think we really need to look at how we can work with some of our suburban, rural, and other counties. When Governor Corbett, I'm glad he's no longer around, governed the charter school reimbursement, that created a major impact in the school district of Philadelphia, as well as school districts all around the Commonwealth. In particular, cyber charters is something that's very problematic for not only the city of Philadelphia, but a number of school districts around the Commonwealth. I think it gives us an opportunity to form a coalition to address cyber charters and make sure we have better funding for our schools.
I will give, I think, a few of the things that were said were really great. 4 things. I think it's not about reforming the 10-year tax abatement, it's about repealing the 10-year tax abatement. To start, I think the pilots is definitely another thing that we should be looking at to ensure that some of these large nonprofits are also paying their fair share. The costing out study at the state level had talked about the state needing to give money to Philadelphia. We've been drastically underfunded for way too long, and we need a moratorium on charter school expansions that's bleeding out our public education system.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything that everyone has said. Absolutely, take the University of Pennsylvania, one of the largest landowners in this city that is listed as a nonprofit, should be paying their fair share, and that money should go directly into our school districts. We definitely need to do the moratorium on the charter schools. And Philadelphia is just about 1/3 of the income for the state, 1/3 of the tax revenue for the state. So we should definitely be getting a lot more money from us. The state owes us a ton of money, and we need to be pushing harder at the state level, from the city level, to make sure that the money that is due us is coming to us.
So similarly to everybody else, I think the difference is I've actually introduced the most comprehensive package of bills to actually change, radically restructure the 10-year tax abatement as we currently know it, including opportunities to eliminate the entire school district portion of it and hold the school district harmless. Regarding pilots, I think it's important to consider the fact that it's an old term, and so maybe what we need is to go to our large institutions and have them pay down, into a school construction and bond initiative. It costs roughly $8 million for every $100 million raised. So, half a billion would be $40 million of investment, and I am certainly talking with our business community and our Chamber of Commerce about making sure that happens.
So, unfortunately, I'm going to agree with most of the other candidates who already spoke. I do agree that the university should pay their fair share. I did run for city council at large in 2015, and I did, at that time, call for a change in the 10-year tax abatement, and I still think that we need to look at the 10-year tax abatement as a way to generate revenue for the school district. I think it's run its course, and it's time for it to go. I also agree with what was said as far as reimbursement to the school district of Philadelphia that was taken away when the charter and given to charters. I think that was one of the things that happened that we just don't talk about enough, because that not only did that impact the funding, it also impacted the language that we use when we're talking about public education. When I ran in 2015, I was one of the few candidates, there were a couple of us, but I was one of the few candidates to call for which eventually became the Fund for Philadelphia. And I think the Fund for Philadelphia is something that exists that we're not utilizing very well right now. I spent some time working in the city controller's office, and I'm a product of the school district of Philadelphia. We have some great alumni who are going on to play professional sports. They want to get back, they don't know the fund exists. So we need a better campaign for that to generate more money for the city.
All right, excellent. All right, so our first of our fast questions, building on the educational theme for our youngest of residents for pre-K education, do you support the continuation of the sugared beverage tax? Everyone see? Hold them up high, right? Okay, thank you. All right. Question number 2. Again, we're looking for some specific proposals within that 1-minute time frame. So please provide one specific proposal for a change in tax structure that would not burden working families, encourage the retention or attraction of employers, small and large, while also providing something that's obviously important for us in the second ward, much needed funding for new progressive initiatives. We're looking for a specific tax proposal, starting here, working all the way to here.
So, again, I am a person who says that we should get rid of the 10-year tax abatement, but I'm also a candidate who has been campaigning on the idea of no new taxes, and let me say why. If we're serious about getting rid of the 10-year tax abatement, we need to make sure that we put ourselves in a position where we're doing it in a way that doesn't create an economic ripple effect. I spent a lot of time working in the controller's office, working with economists, and when we do get rid of the 10-year tax abatement, which we all know will happen, it will create a ripple effect. Once we get rid of the 10-year tax abatement, I think the next thing that we need to do is come up with a comprehensive plan to put ourselves in a position where we can get the big businesses and the big developers in the city of Philadelphia to pay their fair share. The tax structure that we have right now just doesn't work, and it's in favor of the rich corporations and the big developers. And so what I would want to do is work with economists to come up with a comprehensive plan once we get rid of the 10-year tax abatement to be able to figure out how do we get those that are doing very well in the city of Philadelphia to produce more revenue for the municipality.
So I would probably talk about reforming PIDC. It is an entity that takes a ton of federal money, grants, HUD money, HUD loans, and determines a lot of what can be done with it. While I don't know that it's specifically a tax, I think it takes tax dollars and taxpayer dollars to determine whether it chooses to fund luxury boutique hotels in our downtown city, or whether we really want it to do what it needs to do. It's an unaccountable, unelected body. Over half of it is represented by the Chamber of Commerce, and we need to talk about how to wrangle that together. Very recently, I was with Unite Here outside of the W Hotel, which took $50-some million in loans, $17 million in HUD loans. I definitely know that I want my HUD funding to go towards affordable housing and not towards a downtown hotel that has yet to be built.
I agree with everything my previous 2 colleagues spoke on, and we have got to stop taxing the small businesses to death and the people to death, and start taxing the large corporations and larger companies that continue to get break after break after break. if they agree to build here or if they agree to come here. We're losing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year in tax revenue that could be put into affordable housing, that could be put into pre-K, that could be put into our schools to make them a safer environment for our children to learn.
I will also echo what Councilwoman Helen said about PIDC. I also was at the Unite Here rally where millions of dollars is being spent for a boutique hotel. None of the jobs are union jobs. We have been inside of some of these hotels where management is actually actively working to not allow workers to start a union. So I also think that our money should be spent in ways that we think make sense and the way that the community needs. I think we should think about how we're taxing people who make under a certain amount of money. A city wage tax on somebody who makes under $30,000 doesn't actually make sense to me when I think about a lot of the poor people who live in the city and need that money to put food on the table. And then I also think that when we're talking about just funding, the corporations should definitely get taxed. It's also why I as a candidate, have made a commitment to not take corporate PAC money, to not take real estate developer money, and to not take dark money, because when we're talking about these tax structures, I need the people to know who I'm working for and not doubt for a minute that a donor is going to influence where I'm going to be siding on.
One of the major challenges in our city and our state is basically the way our tax structure is set up. We have a gross receipts tax, net income tax, other taxes that when you go to other jurisdictions, other cities, other states, they don't have the same tax structure. One of the problems is that we have a uniformity clause in our state constitution, and the problem with the uniformity clause is that you tax a Walmart the same way you tax a small business called Walt's Mart. And that's a problem. So it's an issue not just here for the city of Philadelphia, but it's an issue for communities all around the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So I think this is an opportunity to try to revise and change the uniformity clause. And that's a big impact that impacts not just the city of Philadelphia, not just a Cheltenham or Norristown or Coatesville or Reading or Harrisburg, impacts cities all around this Commonwealth. And so my experience working as a second vice president for the Pennsylvania Municipal League, I've been talking about these issues with some of my colleagues around the Commonwealth, and I think that's something we need to do, not just in Philadelphia, but for all cities around Pennsylvania.
So Philadelphia is one of the slowest growing economies of the top 10 U.S. cities. And I think that's a major issue here. Our competitiveness in our tax structure is not in good shape. So as we look to the future, the uniformity clause will be a big part of this, but I'd like to figure out how we can shift from a high property tax or an even property and commercial real estate tax to a higher commercial real estate tax system. I'd like to see how we can get more progressive in our wage tax. Again, this is going to require state support. And then also I want to eliminate the gross receipts tax portion of BERT, because I think it's really, as you look around to the rest of the region, and as you look to other cities, this is an awkward tax system that we have, and if we want to be competitive and bring jobs to the city, we're going to have to take a look at how we get more competitive at bringing them here.
Well, for me, it's about eds and meds and looking at education and the medical field in Philadelphia. So you look at the top colleges, the colleges don't pay taxes and they have a lot of revenue that's generated. So the 1% has to be restructured where they can have more of a participation in the process, because they're getting away with, in my opinion, not paying their fair share. And I don't believe that it would hurt them doing that. And it would make the least of these a lot more viable, a lot more positive, and in a position to contribute more to the city of Philadelphia, as opposed to when people are not able to make money, they tend to do things that are not appealing.
Much like my colleagues here and other candidates, I agree that we need to reform the PIDC. And also, we need to see a progressive wage tax. We gotta make sure that the people at the top are paying their fair share. And, you know, this happens everywhere, right? We have to stop burdening the middle, the working class, and the working poor with taxes. The rich and the top 1% has to pay. The wealthy in our city have to pay. And we gotta ensure that. And we gotta go for the universities and make sure that they're contributing their fair share to our city, so that we can see the resources that we want and that we deserve.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so grab your cards. The next question, please hold it high so everyone back can see. Would you end the 10-year property tax abatement? Got that? All right. Thank you. Okay, starting again with Adrian. Please recommend a specific reform that would address the frequency of corruption incidents among members of City Council and would ensure more stringent oversight of the mayor's administration.
So, for City Council, I would say the ending of councilmanic prerogative. We need to make sure that everyone in City Council can take a look and be able to make a decision, right? This is a city of 1.5 million citizens. We need, and we have a body that's composed of 17 members, not a single person, right? This idea that because you have your district and you say, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this, and then everyone else agrees, no, right? Like, we need to look at everything. We can't be doing favors to our friends and our, you know, whatever, our friends. I'm gonna leave it at that. And in terms of the mayor's fund, we just need more accountability. We need to make sure that we're putting in place structures and you know, structures that allow us to demand better and to demand, you know, what needs to be done.
In regards to reform, I think we have to be honest with each other and be honest with the people that we say we represent. We sit in a position when we're elected to make the best decisions for the citizens of Philadelphia. So in terms of oversight, we should be honest with each other and what's best for the city of Philadelphia, not what's best for our best political interest. And throughout decades, you've seen that, particularly in the Afro-American community, nothing has really changed. And that's with primarily Afro-American leadership. So we have to, in my opinion, just be honest and represent what we say. When I believe when we get in office, we intend to do the right thing. But for some reason, we forget what the main reason for us being in office. In terms of the mayor's fund, we definitely have to just have oversight, and I believe there should be community involvement.
And just to clarify, the question is oversight of the mayor's administration, not just the fund. So any questions about keeping tabs on what the mayor's up to?
So ethics is really essential part of I think leadership in City Council, and so one of the things I want to do is propose legislation around the Office of the Inspector General. Right now, the office only oversees the mayor's employees, and any boards appointed by the mayor. I want that jurisdiction to be extended to City Council and any elected official and all of their employees. This is how we start to root out issues of corruption and abuse of power. So that will be amongst the first things I do on ethics. Other issues related to council prerogative, of course, I'm on board with. I built Philly 311 and Philly Stat, ways in which we can be more transparent in how we provide services. So when it comes to oversight over the mayor, I want to make sure we're holding him, maybe someday her, accountable for how we provide services and where we provide services. That's about openly communicating with our public, and that's what I did in Philly Stat. Lastly, I just want to say campaign finance reform is something we still need to consider doing. So I want to block campaign contributions for people doing real estate deals at least 6 months prior to that deal being made and 6 months after. Thank you.
This city has come a long way in representing campaign finance reform and ethics reform from when I served in City Council worked with my former boss, and I co-authored our current campaign finance laws and helped create the independent ethics board that we currently have. But we need to do a lot more. Recently, I introduced legislation that got voted out of the Law and Government Committee to basically eliminate dark money and provide more transparency. I hope that will get passed very soon. In addition, as the vice chair of the Law and Government Committee, I've been an advocate regarding public finance and campaigns. Back when I worked with the staff for having a first hearing regarding public finance and campaigns, I've introduced legislation to bring public finance and campaigns to the city of Philadelphia. I also have a ballot question that's in committee, basically bringing to the voters whether we should have public finance and campaigns in the city of Philadelphia, and if we should use general fund dollars to do that. This legislation I've worked on going back to 2006. I think it's something that's important for the city. I've been working with some of my colleagues to get that passed, and will continue to do so if I get reelected.
Last summer, when I was the executive director of Juntos, we were fighting to end the PARS contract where ICE had access to our arrest database. And one of the things that I think changed the game and why we won our campaign was when Kenny was able to come down and actually meet with community members here in South Philly. And what I actually noticed was that part of the administration wasn't communicating effectively to Kenny about exactly what was going on. And once he was able to talk to people and hear from community members, that made a drastic change in how we were going to move forward. I think we need more ways. It's a movement that actually builds and changes government, and we've seen that on the outside, and we need to hold politicians more accountable to talking to community members, because corruption happens when you live in your silo. Corruption happens when you're not talking to people. So I think we need to have more ways where politicians are actively talking to community members that are most impacted, and I think councilmatic prerogative is a problem, and I think that we actually need to consider what it means for all of us to be talking together with people and transparency about what needs to happen to our city.
So, transparency, communication, accountability, nepotism, entitlement, and term limits. I think those are all key to helping to end corruption. As far as this, even running this campaign, a lot of folks that hold some of the power want, in order for them to figure out if they want to support you or endorse you, they want to know how much money you have sitting in the bank. That's the problem that we're already facing today. That's the problem that most of the people in this city are facing today, is how much money do they actually have access to. Your candidacy, your legitimacy as a candidate should not be representative of the amount of money that you've been able to raise in a campaign. Politics should not be based on the amount of money you have. It should not be based on whether you can raise the amount of money that we're going to be able to put into our own campaigns if you have somebody that is very wealthy or, something like that. So, we definitely need more transparency, more communication, more accountability, and we really need term limits.
I'm a co-sponsor to the term limits bill. I'm a co-sponsor to the public financing of elections. I believe in ending external employment. And I would say in terms of, honestly, I like these forums because, Aaron, I really love your idea about restricting land. If we're going to allow for land disposition to go through any one council member, then I do think we need to restrict finances and contributions related to, if in any way related to those types of sales. At the same time, like on the mayor's side, we do need a real assertion of control over PRA. A lot of the problems that we have are because PRA itself does not assert its own control, that we have a zoning commission that can allow for any number of things to happen. And so the greater oversight that I would see in the mayor's administration would focus specifically on PRA and better transparency.
So the first thing I would say is to elect good people. This is my third time running for city council, and so for me, I've tried to be the change that we're talking about right now, and unfortunately, I haven't won. I'm not saying we've never elected good people. I'm pretty sure some of the folks to my right will argue that, but clearly with the corruption that we still have, we need more good people. So I think the first onus is on all of us as constituents. The second thing, this sounds really simple, but it's not as simple as it is. We need to teach civics and government and political science in the senior year in high school and give young people the option to register to vote. The reason money means so much in elections, and I know because I've run without money, and I know firsthand how difficult it is to get your message out there. The reason money means so much is because I'm a committee person. I'm pretty sure most of the people in here are committee people. Your job is hard. Letting people know there's an election. Letting people know who to vote for. What does that office mean? What does that office do? One of the offices that people always ask about is the city controller's office. I worked there for about 2.5 years, and the city controller's office is responsible for audits and investigations. I have a lot more to say about this issue, but my time is up. But the city controller's office is one that we need more funding for because the controller's office only audits what it has the ability to, and that's not a whole lot. And when you do audit something, we found out months later what happened. So I have more for that one if I can get to it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for an honest assessment. I think to hold the best of those who represent us, we have to be honest about we are all human up here. So realizing kind of the limits of our own abilities and the reach of our office. The next quick question, so grab the cards. Do you support a ballot question to set term limits for city council members? Hold them up high. All right. We agree, right? All right. Last question, unfortunately, because I want to be fair for the next round, the next panel, and also hopefully give ourselves time to meet all of you one-on-one and mingle in between. So this one we're going to limit to 2 minutes because we're already at 2:37. The next panel's at 3, so 2 minutes each. Please describe your number one policy priority while in office and one concrete achievement you envision for yourself by the end of your first term in office. Start here.
I'm sorry, I will hold up a sign when you have 1 minute left.
Thank you.
As well as finish.
Your number one policy priority and the number one achievement, one concrete achievement you hope to have by the end of your term in office.
So my campaign is about improving the quality of life for youth and young people across the city of Philadelphia. I tell people every day, a vote for Isaiah Thomas is a vote for our children. I have a lot of different policy-based initiatives that I want to be able to champion as it relates to changing our climate, culture, curriculum in our schools, as well as the way our schools are governed. I've spent a lot of time doing philanthropy work with young people. I'm also an educator by trade. And so for me, if I were to be successful, of course, with your help, May 22nd, my team and I are automatically charged, and I pledge to jump out in front of charter oversight. I think that's one of the biggest issues that we have as it relates to education in the city of Philadelphia. And what I pledge to do is put together a task force of educators of a variety of different backgrounds, work with state legislators. I've been endorsed by several already who I plan to work with to introduce legislation to be able to jump out in front of the idea of what does charter oversight need to look like and how can we use charter oversight as a way to maintain some of the schools that are good, but more importantly, to get rid of the schools that aren't necessarily good. I also want to be the person who champions OST initiatives for youth and young people across the city of Philadelphia. That's out-of-school time-based initiatives. If you work with our most at-risk children in the city of Philadelphia, while we know our schools are not ideal, that's often the safest time of the day for them. So when you look at the mayor's budget recently, he proposed putting $1 million more into PYN, which is Philadelphia Youth Network. I want to be the council person that not just champions what young people do in schools from 8 to 3, but also champions what happens with young people from 3 until the time they go to bed, as well as in the summertime. We have a huge issue of gun violence in the city of Philadelphia, and I think the best way to address gun violence is to prevent it from happening before we even get there. And so all the initiatives that I talked about are about our children, are about improving the quality of life for youth and young people, and in turn, what I believe will happen is I believe we'll have better schools, I believe we'll create better citizens, and I believe we can reduce the gun violence significantly in the city of Philadelphia.
So I'll talk first about, an achievement. I think there's no question that in the city of Philadelphia, the most devastating combination that we've got is poverty and low-wage jobs. If you talk to decision makers and policymakers, they'll just shrug their shoulders and feel almost as if poverty to some extent is inevitable, and we have to beg, scrape, and plead for any job, no matter how low the wages are or how unstable the schedules may be, just to say that we're getting ahead in any way. But we're trying to change that notion. We're trying to change the idea that somehow our economic growth is tied to corporate markets instead of to the actual health of our communities. And my Fair Work Week law, which passed last December, is the strongest in the nation and helps hourly workers get advance notice of their schedules, pay for any kind of last-minute shift changes, and allows for them to be on a path to full-time hours. And what it does is it changes the idea that somehow power is centralized in the corporate employers who employ us, rather than in a more balanced approach towards how we end poverty in our city. I think my single greatest policy priority at the end of my first term is to make real what local control looks like. I fought all my life to end the state takeover of our public school system. We put in our first term, we ran the most ambitious schools agenda to come out of City Council. We wanted to show what local control looks like. It means a nursing counselor in every school, doubling the number of social workers. It means we tackle things like instrumental music programs and school breakfast for kids, ending the scourge of school suspensions and the school-to-prison pipeline to places like Glen Mills. But clearly, we have a long way to go. And so if we're going to make changes for the future, we want to launch that school construction initiative to modernize schools for the 21st century. It's only not just for teachers and little kids. It's a future for the city, for all of us in this room, as neighbors, as family members, to see whether this city is going to be a city for all of us. I think it starts with schools and with public institutions rather than with private development and out of control, tax abatement stuff run amok. But my counter to that would be realizing the promise of local control in our public school system.
One of my biggest issues would be to address the inefficiencies in our own city agencies. And these inefficiencies are what are helping to fuel the addiction crisis and the homelessness crisis, which are so tightly wound together. We have agencies that have hundreds of millions of dollars worth of budget, and they are still spending this money and addressing these issues the same way that they did in the 90s. And we're facing a completely different crisis today when it comes to homelessness and addiction than we were in the 90s. So everyone thinks that in order to institute new programs that can address things, we have to come up with new money, which means we have to tax people. We don't have to come up with new money. What we have to do is address the way that we're spending the money that we already have. We have to stop throwing good money away into bad resources that we know are not working. So I would want to have more accountability and more transparency of our own city agencies. We keep looking outward. We need to start from within first and change the way that we are spending our money as a city and where we are putting our money as a city.
When my parents first came to Philadelphia, and when I was born, my parents lived at 15th and Tasker. And for over 100 years, South Philadelphia has been known as the immigration hub of the city, and people have been proud of it. We're right on 9th Street. You see all of these local businesses. And I am afraid that if we don't address housing and gentrification, in 5 to 10 years, we will have stores that will represent communities, but won't actually have people like me or my parents owning any of the businesses or the houses or living here. One of the big initiatives I think that we need to take on, we have a high-rise that's going to be built 2 blocks from here, where we're going to have apartments at $1,400 a month, a studio. And at the same time that I learned about that, there's a woman that lives at 8th and Tasker whose rent went up from $900 to $1,400 a month in 1 year. She can't stay. She's going to be moving into Upper Darby where the rent is more affordable. She had a business. And so my concern is that if we don't address this, we're going to lose everybody, not only here, but poor people and poor people of color. I think rent control is a must. I think we must address housing in the city to keep the people who have built the city, immigrants, black people, brown people, poor people who have been working really hard to make Philadelphia what it is and who have been fighting for the city for decades. I think we need to address the criminalization of poor people in this city. I think we need to be working directly with Krasner, who I believe has been doing a great job of radically changing what the DA's office can do for our communities. And as we move forward, we need to also be addressing education. The moratorium on charter schools is a must. We have a 50% dropout rate, and we have a lot of those young people are young people who live in this neighborhood that are for far too long have been ignored. And we must put our resources for those young people. Thank you.
When I think about all the issues that are challenging our city, from housing, healthcare, criminal justice, a lot of these issues all tied to poverty. From my experience and background, having started my career when I came out of University of Virginia as a small business lender for Meridian Bank at Broad and Glenwood, North Philadelphia, from my own family background, having a grandfather started our family's farm business 75 years ago, I've seen the impact of poverty, but I've also seen that the number one creator of jobs is small businesses. So from my perspective, one of the things that we need to do as a city is really help to grow small businesses all around the city of Philadelphia, especially in our neighborhoods. And those are things I've worked on throughout my career and also as a member of City Council, where I reformed our home rule charter to bring in legislation like best value to make it easier for small businesses to get business with the city of Philadelphia. And I think that's something that we need to do. We talked earlier about PIDC. That's an entity that is an organization that really does not benefit small businesses. When I first came into council, I just asked for the bylaws of PIDC, and people looked at me like, what are you trying to do? And I think that's something we need to change, because PIDC brought in PCDC, which was our small business lending entity. In addition to change our home rule charter, I created a Philadelphia Business Lending Network, which brought together 30 different institutions, from small lenders to large lenders, providing resources and creating like a lending tree type of network for small business owners. And some of those institutions, like United Bank, were able to give loans to small businesses that they would not have known about but for the Philadelphia Business Lending Network. So we need to grow jobs in our city. I talked about reforming our uniformity clause and also some of the other issues we've all talked about. But to me, one of the ways we really have to address this 26% poverty rate is creating small businesses and growing small businesses on our commercial corridors around the city of Philadelphia. Imagine if you have a small business that had 2 to 3 employees and they were able to go to 5 to 7 employees. Well, those employees now may be able to invest in their homes, provide more money for our school district and more money for our general fund to help some of the issues I talked about earlier.
One of the reasons I got into this race is because of my family's history and story of addiction, alcoholism, and recovery. And obviously this is a huge public health concern for a lot of families who are experiencing this, both in Philadelphia and outside of Philadelphia. One of the things I want to make sure that we approach in this next legislative season is talking about the current state of the crisis and what we're going to do about it. So that will be the first hearing that I try to get moving in City Council. I want to focus on not just how we remove people from our streets, but how we talk about insurance regulation, what the City of Philadelphia is doing to make sure that we are covering the cost of family treatment programs for families managing this crisis. I want to talk about how we're policing our streets and the underground drug markets. It is one of the reasons that we have such a problem with opioids is because the cost of drugs here is much less expensive than it is in other places. We need to start policing and working with the DEA to make sure that we're getting these drugs off our streets. One of the most important achievements for me will be making sure that the numbers of overdose go down and that families are getting into family treatment programs. Standard levels of care are really important as we deal with addiction, alcoholism, mental illness, and trauma. Those are the numbers I want to see go up, people in treatment, and down, people dying on our streets.
One of the major policies that I would like to see is our environment. By making sure that our environment doesn't look like a cesspool, and there are ways of creating economics from that. So we identify where the waste is and identify the value in the waste. So, like I mentioned earlier, the plastic bottles. China is no longer taking our plastic bottles. So we have to create economic opportunities from the waste. Entrepreneurs, there are many things that can be created from the plastic waste, furniture in particular. So we need to look at policies that will positively affect creating economic opportunities from the waste, such as trash to steam. Policies that will positively affect our environment, number one. Number two, create jobs from affecting our environment. At the end of my first term, I would like to make sure that there was a bill that Councilwoman Gim and Reynolds Brown introduced about not suspending children after the 5th grade. Well, one thing that I would want to make sure is that children are reading on grade level, doing math on grade level, and writing on grade level by the time they're in the 6th grade, so that they'll have the opportunities to take advantage of the policies that will be implemented to introduce training and education reform. So that's pretty much how I would like to see my first term.
My apologies. So I'm going to tell a story. I come from a very working class background. My parents grew up very, very poor. My mom grew up in public housing. My dad grew up in a house that had no running water. While growing up, we struggled a lot. We struggled to keep a home. We struggled to even afford health care. And the two things that, despite all of the struggles, which are struggles that are very similar to so many people in this city and all over the country, despite all of those struggles, I always had a roof over my head, and I always had a good education. And so we need to address poverty in the city, but we need to talk about housing, right? If people in our city are not having proper housing, don't have a roof where to live, it's really hard to climb out of poverty. We need to make sure that we're establishing rent control, right? So I want to champion that, and I echo a lot of what, and most of what Erica said. We need to be championing that. But also, a big victory for me is, I had those opportunities. I came here and I got a PhD in cancer research from the University of Pennsylvania, right? So I'm a scientist. I want to look at evidence before I make policy and make evidence-based policy making. And we know that the climate change is an imminent threat to all of us. And it's a threat it's something that will affect mostly Black and brown poor communities. If a candidate doesn't, I want to champion a Green New Deal for Philadelphia, and I think that will be my biggest victory, because I know we can. I know we have the resources. We have to stop investing in fossil fuel industry in our city. We need to make sure, right, that we transition to zero carbon emissions, because if we don't do that, the first communities that will be affected are poor Black and brown communities. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you especially for respecting the time limit. Well done. Okay, so to wrap up, to help us really get to know all of you and compare all of you, because we have a tough decision to make, a few final of our fast questions with these great cards. So first one. Do you support an increase in the minimum wage to $15 an hour? Okay, good. Next one. Do you support a moratorium on new charter schools? All right, and two more. Do you support ending the legislative practice of councilmanic prerogative? Got that? All right. Finally, do you support disallowing, no longer allowing, members of city council from accepting any form of outside employment while in office? Okay. Because this is a great job to have, so what else do you need, right? Still push back. All right, thank you everyone.